if we want to call the pressure coming down archetypal pressure, like apocalypse as an archetype, the end of an era, that's also the beginning of an era, but the beginning part is less evident than the ending part. Then what also happens, and this is why I wanted to work on this idea of the wounded healer, what happens is there are also archetypes that respond from within to the outside world. And so I'm classifying, or in my own way of thinking about it, putting the wounded healer as an archetypal response inside people to the collapse of the ecosystems and the polarization of societies and the loss of truth and meaning. That the soul is not like the infant that doesn't know what to do. The soul is the place where helping archetypes can arise. And I'll try to, so I think I need to say something about archetypes. Archetype means, ancient type, ancient model. And so the archetypes are universal. They're experienced individually, but they're experienced by everybody, so they're universal. And archetypes happen to hold the potentials of life. Archetypes also can initiate behaviors that help us respond to the conditions of life. And archetypes do that outside of and regardless of ego, attention, or the will of a person. And so here's an example of that. There's all kinds of archetypes. People are aware of them: mother, father, birth, death. Those are archetypal things that everyone's going to experience somehow. And there's many of those archetypal dynamics. So if I go to the mother archetype, because I was already there, so then what happens is, I want to give you an example of how the archetype can awaken in anybody. So let's say a middle-aged man, stepping out of the office to do something, is walking down the street and sees on the sidewalk on the side, sees a little, like a bassinet or whatever that is, a carrying thing for infants, and realize there's an infant in that thing and it's been abandoned there on the street. Now, someone might turn away and say, this is not my business. But most people, regardless of gender, age, and other things, would immediately go to this defenseless, abandoned infant and, see if it's okay, figure out if there's someone that is nearby that doesn't know that they've left this behind, or whatever. A series of things would happen, which would be to protect the infant, to figure out if it needs to be fed or nourished right now, to find a place to where it could be secure, and to begin to contact others to help. Well, that's an example of the mother archetype kicking into a person because of the situation they're in. I hope this makes sense. And I'm saying it could happen to anyone, that you don't have to be a literal woman who gave birth to be affected by the mother archetype. I was once, for a while, the single father for 4 children, and I found all kinds of things that I otherwise probably wouldn't have known or experienced. And only afterwards that I realized the mother archetype had been activated. So that's one of the archetypes that I think is activated at this time. Because when we worry about the earth and we're concerned about everything that's happening that is damaging to the earth, people used to call it Mother Earth. We know that earth is the archetypal representation of nourishing, protection, and connection. And so it's being stirred in us, regardless of whether we're biological mothers or not. I would say another thing that is an archetype that is stimulated because of the issues of the end and beginning, which are issues of creation. The chaos in the world is like the chaos that before the world began. And so you could also say the creator archetype is activated nowadays. So if you take my notion that the archetype comes in to support us, inform us, and assist us in dealing with life circumstances, then way more creation is needed. We have to create ways to work with nature, ways to work with conflict, ways to work with sicknesses and all that kind of thing. So the creator archetype is already stimulated. And I'm saying that because this can be a reassurance in terms of not getting overwhelmed by the fear of abandonment and the fear of all the distortion in the world. If we understand that there are archetypal energies that awaken under certain circumstances, the capacity to create things, if we're open to it and if we're not too wounded to connect to them, are also there. So a few more things about archetypes, because to me, this psychological consideration is really important. I'm saying that under all the pressure, we are being pushed and pulled into a greater psychological awareness. And the archetypes that also get activated in critical times, in intense times, have aims and purposes. Like the mother archetype is aimed at protecting, nourishing, and helping new things to grow. The creator archetype is aimed at bringing new things into the world. The wounded healer archetype is purposed and aimed at bringing healing to the wounds that are already there. And so that's why I'm interested in this wounded healer archetype at this time. I think we are being called, frail and confused and uncertain as we can be, small as we can be compared to the great crises, small as we can be compared to the cosmos. We are being called to respond to the wounding of the world as not as heroes, but as potential healers who are also working on our own wounds. That's how I'm imagining the archetype in the world and in our own souls. So, so the wounded healer archetype, the other thing that makes me think about the wounded healer is wounded and healer is like a paradox. And we're in paradoxical times. And often I think of it as liminal space. We're in that space between one thing and another. We're also in the polarized times. And you could also see wound and healing as polarized things, if they're not working, as opposed to, concurrent things, if the archetype is in play. And so we're in that kind of time of division. And so an archetype that has in it naturally opposite things like wounded healing, it seems like appropriate that it would not only be activated, but it could help us see how to live during these times and how to be psychologically, emotionally growing rather than defeated and overwhelmed, and therefore becoming more able to find a path through which we can help heal others, nature, earth, whatever it is we're going to be called to. So I'll state it one more way. The wrens and the conflicts in the world also stimulate archetypal potentials for healing and finding wholeness and finding renewal. The wounded healer archetype is invoked in us as our paradoxical situation parallels the themes of abandonment and suffering in healing myths.